Hello, everyone. There really are so many unexpected things happening today. Honestly, I don't even know exactly what happened. Everything was perfectly fine until this morning, but then suddenly the entire channel just disappeared. It was completely and utterly erased from existence. So I guess a professional lawyer will inevitably have to get involved in this situation. It really looks like it will take quite some time to resolve. So for the time being, I'll just continue broadcasting right here. I don't know if I should call this a complete bolt from the blue, but something truly absurd and unexpected has happened. Anyway, what I specifically wanted to talk about with you today was I recall hearing some information from her last year that she worked a very demanding schedule and her physical health deteriorated quite a bit. However, even though a full year has now passed, her bone health hasn't shown much improvement, so she naturally asked why. Since not only Ms. Haysuk, but truly anyone could experience a difficult situation just like this, I thought it would be a good idea to review this case as a learning opportunity for everyone today. To provide some context, Ms. Kim Hae-suk has dealt with these kinds of challenging health experiences. She unfortunately suffered through a painful toe fracture, a serious rib fracture, and she also had to spend time recovering from a painful spinal fracture. Because of all these combined health issues, she has been suffering a great deal lately. While she was receiving treatment at the hospital, she happened to come to know about our channel and decided to come here for help. I don't know if she can find this episode. If it is not possible today, please make sure to let her know about this channel and the episode later on. She sent us 2 different osteoporosis test results for review. She sent them over to us just like this, and if we organize the information provided here, as you know, L1 is the first lumbar vertebra, L2 is the second, L3 is the third, and L4 is the fourth. So L1 to L4 refers to the first through fourth lumbar vertebrae. If I show you that diagram once again with a slightly different picture, when you undergo a bone scan, this is exactly what your lumbar spine looks like. Starting from the very top, it is numbered as the first, second, third, and fourth vertebrae, just like this. Then when we say we are measuring from the first to the fourth, it simply means we are talking about the overall average value from the first down to the fourth vertebrae. Next, this specific area refers to the femoral neck. So please look closely at that part. She wrote that it hasn't changed at all. However, as you can clearly see from the tables on the screen, there are some areas that have significantly improved. For example, in the case of the second lumbar vertebra, it improved by 0.6, which is a significant improvement. But the third lumbar vertebra, L3, worsened by 0.7, so that's quite a decline. So if we look at the data on average, the lumbar spine is currently at about plus 0.1, which essentially means it is very similar to what we saw last year. Next, if you take a look at the femur overall, as you can see clearly at the very bottom, it has actually gotten a bit worse with a reading of minus 0.4. But if you look more closely at the details, the trochanter area, specifically the greater trochanter, has actually improved quite a bit by approximately plus 0.5. So if you were to ask whether things have improved or gotten worse overall, you could say the lumbar spine has just been maintained, while the femur has gotten a bit worse. That would be the most accurate way to describe the situation. Now, this is a summary of those findings. As you can see here, some specific areas have improved a lot, while other areas have unfortunately gotten much worse. You can see that reflected right here. So it really makes me think that something isn't being done quite properly. That is why I want to take a much closer look at each individual part. In this diagram, you can see that the spine is more or less being maintained, while the femur has gotten noticeably worse. Sometimes we see the exact opposite. The femur is fine, but the spine is in bad shape. So to speak more academically, the lumbar vertebrae and the femur bones are actually shaped quite differently from one another. How are the structures of the bones different? The vertebrae or the lumbar bones in your lower back are mainly made up of what is known as cancellous bone, which naturally has a lot of small holes in it. On the other hand, the femur is surrounded by very hard bone on the outside, what we specifically call cortical bone. So the bone on the outer layer, the cortex, is extremely hard, and the structure of the bone itself is incredibly strong. Because the femur is so strong, it is quite hard for it to show much improvement, and it also takes a significantly longer time for it to deteriorate. In fact, for the vast majority of people, the lumbar bones tend to get damaged first, and the femur usually gets damaged much later. So usually the femur is in better condition. If you look at this person as well, the femur is actually in better shape. If you look at the numbers, right, last year the lumbar spine was at minus 3.8, and this year it's at 3.7. It got worse, but it's minus 3.7. But even though the femur got much worse, it's still minus 2.9. That means since we are creatures that walk upright, there is that kind of effect. You can certainly think of it in that way. If you look more closely at the vertebrae, as you can see right here, what we call the cancellous bone or spongy bone has these small holes in it, especially in the lumbar vertebrae. So its primary characteristic is the processes of bone formation and bone resorption, that is the breakdown and creation of bone, occur at a very fast rate. In cases of aging or menopause, the effects first appear in the lumbar vertebrae. So most people are diagnosed with osteoporosis because their lumbar spine has deteriorated. That's what this means. If we take a closer look at the primary roles of the vertebrae, one of the most important roles they play is to support our overall body weight. Next, these bones are designed to effectively absorb and dissipate mechanical shock. If the bones were unable to absorb all of that shock, that impact would be transmitted directly to our internal organs, which would create a highly problematic and potentially dangerous situation for the body. Looking specifically at the internal structure of the bone, about 70% is made up of what is known as trabecular bone, and the rest is cortical bone, so the overall proportion of trabecular bone is actually quite high. You might naturally think there are no blood vessels inside the bone, but actually there are many blood vessels inside and blood, which makes the metabolic processes occurring within the bone structure active. Because of this complex system, the vertebrae are able to react very quickly to various external factors and internal changes. This applies to both good and bad things. Next, if we look closely at the femur, as you can clearly see in the anatomical picture on the right, the outer part has a very thick, solid border like the one shown here. It is structured much like a hollow pipe with a dense outer border, and inside there are numerous tiny little holes scattered throughout. So, as a result, the overall proportion of dense cortical bone is much higher here, making it significantly stronger than almost all other bones in the body. Since this specific bone is actually the most important one for our daily movement, especially for the act of walking, you can easily understand that it is quite remarkably strong, durable, and sturdy. Now, as mentioned earlier from above, it is described as having a rich blood supply and active metabolism. But if you look here, although blood vessels do pass through, they are not as abundant as in the lumbar vertebrae. So, relatively speaking, the metabolism is slower. Furthermore, since the dense outer layer of the bone is incredibly hard, the process remains the same when it is being formed. Just as it naturally takes a significantly longer amount of time to carefully craft something that is exceptionally sturdy and durable, you can easily understand that the large femur bone also requires quite a bit more time to fully develop and form properly. So, we must ask, why exactly didn't this person get any better? There could be several different reasons, but first of all, if you look closely at this person's bone density results from last year, you can see it was as low as minus 4.4. Since that's a very serious matter indeed, even if you're taking ion CalMeg, you definitely need to take at least 2 packets a day, and then you should also make sure to monitor your serum vitamin D levels. You need to consistently maintain your blood vitamin D level at around 60 nanograms per milliliter or so, but the real question is whether that was actually maintained. Also, since this person is working late into the night hours, it might be quite difficult for her to exercise during the day because they're busy trying to catch up on their much needed sleep. So I think they probably didn't get enough physical exercise either. In addition to that, she might have also been significantly lacking in other essential nutrients like collagen. But you see, this individual also weighs quite a bit less than average. So that is another significant issue to consider. And not being able to perform regular exercise is also a major problem. So even though she might say she has done well overall, I really want her to take a moment to reflect on herself. So let me explain the details a bit more. On April 3rd of last year, her vitamin D level was measured at 34.5, but by September, it had increased to 61.81. I most likely told them to take 2 full bottles of ImmunoShield to achieve this result. And since the level was finally reached at 61, I think I told them to reduce it to just 1 pill daily. But here is where the actual problem arises. She took 2 ImmunoShield pills every day for about 5 months. After the 5-month period, her level went up to 61. Next, the most critical factor to consider is whether the level stayed at 60 after reducing the dosage to just 1 pill. But what you really need to do is for every individual participant involved, for example, at the very first, in the case of ImmunoShield V3, each pill contains 4,000 IU of vitamin D. So if you start by taking 8,000 IU and reach a level of 60 after about 5 months, then reduce it to 4,000 IU, your level could drop again. So what most people should do is once they've reached a level of 60, so now you know how to reach a level of 60, but even after you reduce the dosage, you need to check your levels again. Check it again after about 3 months to see how much your level drops after reducing the dose. Then you'll know how much more you need to take. You really need to carefully determine and calculate the right vitamin D intake for your own body. You can't just say, I reached 60, so I reduced 1 pill exactly as you told me, but it didn't seem to work for my situation. That's simply not the right approach to take. What I mean is, I can't possibly know everyone's current bone density levels or your baseline vitamin D status. Even if we all take the exact same amount of vitamin D, some people absorb the supplement into the body much more efficiently, while others have much lower absorption efficiency. You have to check those levels for yourself. The most critical point to understand here is, even if you take 2 packets of Ion Calmeg, if your blood vitamin D level doesn't reach a level of about 60, it simply will not be able to properly open up the calcium channels in your intestines. So you won't be able to absorb a sufficient amount of calcium. So basically, if your intake is insufficient and that supply is unreliable, that's the actual root of the problem that we are seeing. Next, when this person sends in their questions, she tends to just send simple test results without related information. But if you have osteoporosis, there are always some important factors you need to keep a very close eye on. When you go to the hospital for a blood test, you should ask them to check these 3 things. Please don't forget to ask serum vitamin D, serum calcium, and ionized calcium blood level test. The reason these are necessary is for situations like this. Even if you think you've done everything right, you need to have these tests to check what's actually happening in your blood. So, in my opinion, there's a high possibility that this person's vitamin D levels have dropped back down. And I'm also not sure if they're taking the right amount of ionized calcium supplements. Next, this person fundamentally has an issue with their weight. This person is about 151 centimeters tall. Oh, the age was wrong. This person is 67 years old. Anyway, this person, her weight, you see, ideally even on the lower end, it would actually be much better if she weighed around 55 kilograms, but currently her weight is 53 kilograms now. To provide some context, back in 2022, her recorded body weight was measured at 55 kilograms, but now in 22 and 24, it has decreased to 54, and by 2026, it is projected to be 53. So, when compared to the time when the osteoporosis was first diagnosed, the overall weight has dropped by about 2 kilograms. Furthermore, when I calculated the BMI based on the current figures, the result came out to be approximately 20. So having a BMI of 20.4 is not enough. So for this person, no matter what, the weight needs to be brought up to at least 55 kilograms. In other words, it needs to be brought back to the original value. Although we have already covered various other important topics, regular exercising is still extremely important for maintaining health. So In this particular person's case, it seems quite challenging and difficult to do any strenuous or intense physical exercise now. Engaging in physical exercises like climbing stairs, brisk walking, or jumping rope should be done every day for at least 30 minutes. I really want to reiterate and strongly emphasize that crucial point once more. This is what is shown in the table right now. You shouldn't treat this like it's just someone else's private business, or simply go about doing it as if it's a very tedious piece of homework. Since you're doing it for yourself because it's your own business, you should ask yourself, how am I doing it? You need to pay very close attention to these things. And of course, since everyone has their own busy personal lives, it can be quite hard to take care of your body while managing your daily routine. But if you don't have your health, can you really have a life? So, starting today, you really need to reconsider things a bit. What is it that you need to reconsider? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and am I doing it properly? First, increase your body weight. Second, maintain your blood vitamin D level at 60. However, to do that, you should get a blood test every 3 months or so, a few times, to determine the right amount of vitamin D intake for yourself. Third, you should take 2 packs of Calmeg per day, and it's much better to spread them out throughout the day rather than taking them all at once. So it would be beneficial for you to keep that in mind and put it into practice. And of course, the last thing to remember is regular exercise. In my opinion, this person probably barely has time to sleep. Since you come home at dawn and so on, you need to consider that kind of environment. You really need to think about it. Still, you should take this commitment very seriously and try to dedicate and set aside for yourself at least 1 full hour every day. So if you can manage to give yourself even just 30 or 40 minutes a day to perform proper, consistent exercise, your bones will gradually become significantly stronger and healthier over time. It's not that her condition has gotten really bad. As I showed you earlier, there are actually some areas that have improved. So you really need to keep that important point in mind. The problem is that at the hospital, they tend to say things quite unconditionally. For example, if you take a close look at the spine here, specifically on the left side, you see various numbers like minus 3.7, 4.4, 3.8, 3.4, and so on. So at that specific time, the doctor probably told this person, you currently have the bones of someone who is already in their 80s or even their 90s. What do you think that was based on? They were talking about that minus 4.4 value. Hospitals, they always use the worst numbers to make patients more alert or cautious. When they have some improvement, I wouldn't say like what they say. If there's an area that's gotten a bit better, I'd say this part has improved, but you need to put in a bit more effort. That way, the patient thinks, is there something I'm still lacking? If something has improved, then depending on what I do from now on, things could get even better. You need to give patients some encouragement like this, but the major problem with hospitals is that they only focus on the bad things and constantly talk about the very worst numbers. I'm not simply speaking about my own personal perspective. I am saying this based on the many things I have heard from all of you recently. So it is quite likely that many of you have also had this specific kind of experience yourselves. That's why I strongly encourage you to take the time to personally review your own bone density test results. Please carefully record each number one by one on your report and then thoroughly compare them against your previous records. For example, just like Ms. Kim Hae-suk had written down your bone density test results from 2025 and 2026, you wouldn't just say to me, my bones aren't getting any better, what's going on? I don't think you would have asked this kind of question. You might have wondered, why did some results improve so much while others got so much worse? You probably would have doubted it at least once. So instead of constantly complaining to your doctor at the hospital, you need to start making an effort to manage and observe your own body well. So take a look for yourself. Since there are both blue and red areas like that, if I work hard to improve on what I haven't been doing well, won't there be even more blue areas? Wouldn't you can think like this? So, including Ms. Kim Hae-suk and everyone else who is currently experiencing situations just like this one, it is crucial that you take the time to carefully examine your own information and take a close look at the areas where you might be making mistakes, as well as the things that you are doing quite well. That is the main thought I have. For the time being, since it looks like I will have to continue meeting with all of you right here on this channel until my original channel is fully restored, if you happen to know anyone around you who regularly watches our content, it would be a wonderful help if you could let them know they need to come over here and share today's video with them. We are also currently in the process of developing a brand new app, and it will most likely be released to the public within this month. Once that is ready, even if a YouTube channel like this one gets taken down, we will be able to contact you all directly. So I truly think that having that direct connection is a very good thing for us. So anyway, that is exactly how we will proceed from here. Thank you so much for coming and watching today, even though things have been quite hectic and complicated lately. And in any case, I really hope we can all learn properly and take very good care of our own health and well-being.
Fuel your body at the cellular level with Nanowell Ubiquinol CoQ10. This powerful formula combines premium Ubiquinol CoQ10 with polycosanol and red yeast rice to boost cellular energy production, support heart health and cholesterol levels, protect cells from oxidative damage, enhance exercise performance, support cognitive function, and may even improve fertility. Experience the benefits of this unique blend and elevate your overall well-being with Nanowell Ubiquinol CoQ10. Unlock your body's full potential. Try Nanowell Ubiquinol CoQ10.